Greetings, people who surely must be warmer than we are here in central Pennsylvania. It's really, really cold here today. Please allow me to quickly review my chord symbol before I move on to my final chord video. I showed you the chord symbol, root tone, type indicator, size indicator, modifier. Okay, we talked about that. I showed that there are only 5 type indicators, 5 types of bass chord: augmented, major, minor, dominant, diminished. Very simple. I showed that there are only 4 size indicators, but there are 5 sizes of bass chords. And the reason why there are only 4 size indicators is because no size indicator is needed for the 5th chord. That's what I call the 5th chord in my system. We went over that, so you should know that by now. Right? And the modifiers are very few. There's numbers uses modifiers, and there's symbols, and there aren't that many. That's to show that some notes were added or omitted or changed in some fashion. All right? And I also showed that if you have a chord in which the bass note is not the same as the root, then you indicate the bass note by putting notating your chord, then putting your forward slash, and then your bass note. Here's another example. This F sharp minor 7 was determined to be our bass chord, but we saw that the actual bass note was not the same as the root of the chord. All right, we talked about that. And then the whole system is based on a foundation, and the foundation is the bass chords. And I showed you my bass chords. I don't call these triads because, first of all, it's obvious. Anybody can see it's a triad. So I call them 5th chords because the highest note in the bass chord, right, is a 5th. So we call them 5th chords. These are 7th chords. I showed you those. All right. Then we have the bass chords called the 9ths. Right? I showed you those. I explained in detail why I kept the C diminished 9th bass chord. It's a little silly, but it's kind of cute, so I kept it in. And then here's your 11th bass chords. I showed you those. And I won't show the 13th because the 13ths are the same as the 11ths, except they have a note placed at a third above this note on each one. There's just another third above here. There's no need to write those out. So we talked about all that stuff. Then if we look at another sample chord, we see the graphic version. That's my whole new idea, the graphic representation of a chord. Then you have my linear alphanumeric backup version to notate your chord. So here we have a C minor 9th, and in that chord, that bass chord, all right, we see that the modification was made. The 5th has been diminished. The 5th was removed, the perfect 5th, and the diminished 5th was placed in there. Now that's mentally. I'm saying this mentally. Now here we see the same thing, only it's linear alphanumeric. You got numbers and letters. C minor 9 point diminished sign and the 5. Same thing. All right, we talked about that. Now, one thing I wanted to tell you that I don't think I mentioned is, let's say we have that C minor 9th with the diminished 5, diminished 5th. That's this. Oh, by the way, this flat sign should be over farther, but it doesn't matter. Okay, so now here's that C minor 9 with the diminished 5th. So you see you have your C minor 9, you see your C minor 9th bass chord because you have your minor 3rd and your minor 7th, so you know it's a minor 9th chord, and you see the only modification is the diminished 5. So I'm saying mentally, technically, you took out the perfect fifth, and you put in the diminished fifth. Now you notated that diminished fifth down here in your modifier space, correct? We talked about that. Now here's what I didn't show you. Okay, that's an example with one modifier. But what if you have two modifiers? So over here we have a different chord. We have a C dominant seventh chord, and we have two modifications. We have an augmented fifth and a minor ninth. So let's look at that chord. Now initially we would have determined that here we have a bass chord. It's a C dominant 7 because your seventh interval is a minor 7. So we know that that bass chord is a C dominant 7. But modifications were made. The fifth, all right, was taken out, and an augmented fifth put in your mind. And then up here, the 9, we use a minor ninth. So what happens is when you have two modifications, the beautiful thing about my chord symbol is with two modifiers, what you do is you notate, you list those modifiers. You see augmented 5, minor 9 in this order. You list them in the same order that you see them on the notation paper. You see you have your augmented fifth, then you have your minor 9 above that. So you list that in your chord symbol, you list that exactly the same way. All right? That's pretty clear and pretty obvious. Now, I told you that I kind of follow the traditional system and build chords in thirds. And so let's look at what kind of thirds they actually are. So here are the fifth bass chords. Right? There's only 4 fifth bass chords. These were what they used to call triads, which I think is silly. It's obvious. So here we have a C augmented bass chord. That's a C augmented fifth bass chord. Now you see here we have the C, E, G sharp. So that tells us that because there's 4 half steps between the C and the E, and 4 between the E and the G sharp, that you have 2 major thirds. In this bass chord, you have 2 major third intervals. See that? Now over here you have the C major chord. Everybody knows C major, it's very common. And in between the C and the E, you have a major third, an interval of a major third. And between the E and the G, you have a minor interval. And that's 3 half steps for the minor and 4 half steps for the major. So here, from root to fifth, you get only 7 half steps total. Over here with the C augmented, you got 8 half steps total. Then we move on to the C minor, fifth bass chord. And you see here from C to E flat, it's a minor third. And from E flat to G, we get a major third. And that too has a total of 7 half steps from root to fifth. And here is the C diminished chord. It's a C diminished bass chord. And from C to E flat, you have a minor third. And from E flat to G flat, you have another minor third. So in total, you have only 6 half steps from your root to your fifth in the chord. So you see there, we do, in this system, we do keep in mind whether they're major or minor thirds. That's very important. But once you memorize it, you don't worry about it too much. You don't need to impart that information because, like I said earlier, the beautiful thing was once you memorize your bass chords, once you memorize these and recognize them quickly, you see, then you don't have any big problem worrying about is it a minor third or a major third. It won't matter anymore once these are memorized and used repeatedly. Okay, now with the 7th bass chords, this is what you get. Here's your C augmented 7th bass chord, and you see the intervals from root to third. Root to third is major, and then from third to fifth is a major, and then from your fifth to your seventh is a minor, and so forth. You can look at that if you want to. Hold it up a little bit. And those are your seventh bass chords. And then you can look at your 9th, 11th, and 13th bass chords and pretty much figure that out on your own. Now here's another thing I wanted to say. It's a pet peeve that bothered me from the beginning, from the very beginning. When I told you when I read that keyboard magazine and this whole process got started, this chord thing, this is what bothered me. I have a chord in my system. It's a C minor 7th bass chord with a diminished fifth. I think I've shown you that before. Now in traditional theory, contemporary, they would call that, they would probably write it like this. They would say C minor 7 flat 5, or they would do this. They would put a C with the sign that's supposed to be called a half diminished sign. This is supposed to be called a half diminished symbol. All right? That's what they call it. C minor 7 flat 5 or C half diminished, which is really crappy. It's terrible. Don't teach children that. Now here's the problem. The actual, let's say you had an actual chord, a minor 7, and the fifth note had a flat sign on it. Okay, it was a flat 5, right? The note at the interval of a fifth, all right, would be flat only in these keys. Only in the key of C, D, E, F, G, A, and B flat would that fifth note on paper have a flat sign with it. In none of the other keys will it work. Here's an example. I want to make this really clear so you don't think I'm completely neurotic or worrying for no reason. If you had a chord, an actual bass chord, a C flat minor 7, right now we're in the key of C flat minor 7 with a diminished fifth, right? The modifier is only 1, it's a diminished fifth. You see here that the notes in that chord would be C flat, E, G natural, not flat, and then B flat. This cannot be a flat 5 because with that modified fifth, you will have yourself a G. It will not be a G flat. With F sharp minor 7, with the diminished fifth, the actual chord, you would not have a flat 5 because you would have F sharp, your root, A, C natural, not C flat, E. So in that key, just as an example, that flat 5 terminology will not work. And finally, there's, as an example, A flat minor 7 with a diminished fifth. That's a proper chord. You would have the notes A flat, C, E double flat, G flat. You would not have E flat. You would not have a flat 5. You'll have flat 5 only in these keys. And you say, well, Joey, these are common keys, so who cares? Everybody uses these keys. Who uses these? Nobody uses these. Well, they do. And the thing is, when you're teaching new students or teaching little children, you kind of don't want to teach them a bunch of crap. So I wanted to say that. And that's it. I'm going to move on to what I hope will be my summary video for my new chord symbol. And might go a little long, but the point is, I think eventually my system will catch on and people will use it. Time will tell. So thank you for being patient again, and hope to see you soon.